Some people are made of plastic. Some people are made of wood. What's up, everybody? This is your boy Kenny, and this is Unsung Season 11, and this episode was about the Dramatics. I will have to go on to say that Dramatics is probably one of the best R&B groups of all time, and they definitely had an impact on my life. I mean, I can recall listening to their songs growing up. And those of you who've been following me, y'all know that I am like a big lover of old school R&B, and definitely, even as a youngster, even though this music was way before my time, it had an impact on me. And even to this day, sometimes when I listen to their music, I get chills. So let me get started with my commentary on this episode. Some of the people who did commentary on this episode were Snoop Dogg, Cedric the Entertainer, Willie Ford, and Larry Squirrel Demps, who are the surviving members of the Dramatics, and many others. And it was a really good episode, and there were definitely certain things that happened that even shocked me, because there was a lot about the group that even I didn't even know. So let me begin. Let's see. The group was formed in the 1960s in Detroit, and they were inspired by the Temptations. And they got the name Dramatics because, the whole concept of the group is that they were acting in rhythm, which I thought was very genius because it really fit them to a T. In 1964, they actually auditioned for Motown, but they were told that they were too young. Larry Squirrel Demps even said, well, you guys signed to Jackson 5 and Stevie Wonder. They were too young. Like, what kind of shit was that? But what they did is that they actually did a lot of singles for different local labels in Detroit, and it really made them really big in Detroit, and they got a lot of shows. They were actually, but then within the process of that, in 1967, they actually had a tragic situation, which was also a part of, the subject of the movie that was just released this past weekend called Detroit. In 1967, the Dramatics was performing at the Fox Theater in Detroit, and the Detroit riots broke out. And, the members looked for a safe haven, and one of the safe havens that they went to was the Algiers Motel, which is one of the main places where the movie is based on, because there were some traumatic events that happened at their site. And two of their members, Rod Davis and Larry Reed, were actually victims of brutalization at the Algiers Motel. And one of Rod Davis, I think they said they actually shot by his head and actually beat him, with a rifle. And they even said that one of the members of their band, I forgot his name, but he was a teenager, and he was actually killed. And but if y'all remember it, put it down in the comments. Definitely like to hear from you guys. But that was shocking because this movie Detroit just recently came out, and I didn't even realize, because I haven't seen the movie yet, but I didn't know that two members of the Dramatics were actually involved in that. And I think what's his name, Algie Smith, who actually was in the New Edition movie, I think he plays one of the members of the Dramatics. I could be wrong, but I think so. But after that event, both of these men were very traumatized by it, and they ended up leaving the group. And they were actually replaced by they were actually replaced by William Howard, known as Ouija, and I think Willie Ford actually replaced him and replaced the two that left after that that Detroit riot massacre at the Algiers Motel, and they pretty much carried on, and they ended up getting signed with Stax Records. Stax Records is the home of the acts of like Otis Redding, Johnny Taylor, and Isaac Hayes. And they actually was teamed up with this great songwriter named Tony Hester, and he was like the driving force behind the dramatic sound. And their first album, they actually definitely made a major impact with two hits. One is which was a part of the interlude that I did in the beginning of this video, What You See Is What You Get. And Snoop Dogg even talked about that this song, I think he said his mom used to play it all the time. But he said the thing that stuck out about that song was some people are made of plastic and some people are made of wood. And he said that is like the most truthful statement you could think of, because it is about life. What you see is what you get. And for me, what I get from it is, a quote comes to mind from Maya Angelou, that when someone shows you who they are, believe them. You have to know the fact that some people are made of plastic and some people are made of wood. Some people are going to give you fakeness. Some people are going to give you realness, and you have to know what you're dealing with. But that song, What You See, What You Get, came out in 1971. It went number 7 on R&B and went number 9 on pop. And that album, the album of that album actually went to number 10 on the R&B chart. So it was a top 10 album. And another hit, which is definitely one of my favorites. I mean, oh my God, I'm not even gonna lie. Every time I hear this song, a lot of times it just takes me to like a place, where you're either thinking about, loving somebody, or you're really thinking about the loss of someone, or you're just thinking about, or you're just really in a really sad place. And the song that I'm talking about is In the Rain, which is actually, was actually led by Ouija. And, that song went to number 1 on R&B charts and went number 5 on pop, and actually is one of their biggest hits. And man, that song does stuff to me. That song still gives me chills. And that's a timeless track. I mean, you can still hear that song now, like if you go to a family event, or to like a cabaret. Oh, trust me, when that song starts playing, oh, that's time to start dancing, and that's time to, get close to the one you love, and things happen. but yeah, that's a beautiful song, and it's a song that I still love to this day. And it was beautiful. But then that was the greatness of the writer Tony Hester. I mean, he really was like the magic ingredient to the dramatics. I mean, he pretty much had magic in the pen. And it was around this time, after, In the Rain, because it was a number 1 hit, Ouija, while they were on tour, Ouija started to kind of change up, because, this is kind of typical that happens with a lot of people in the industry. Like, you get those people in your ear that kind of tells you that, you're the it factor, you're the best thing, and, you should go solo, and, you're better than everybody else. And sometimes people who are not as strong-minded start to believe the hype, and that's what happened with Ouija. And he pretty much, I think that by this time they haven't even been paid, for their hits, and he was demanding more money, and he wanted to see the contracts, and if he didn't get a chance to see the contracts, he wasn't going on stage. So eventually he ended up leaving, and this happened, I think, in 1972. And he was replaced by L.J. Reynolds. Now, L.J. Reynolds was actually a big fan of theirs, and pretty much he said, L.J. even said that he noticed that Ouija wasn't there, so he pretty much auditioned for the band, and he literally sung that album a cappella in an alley, and they were blown away, by this guy's voice. And LJ, oh my God, LJ was definitely one of those singers that I definitely loved. I mean, I love his voice. Him and Ron Banks, they were like, some of the best voices. But the great thing about the Dramatics is that they had 5-part harmony. All 5 of them could sing lead, and that just really brought out the drama of the group. That there was so many different characterizations, but yet they came together and gave you a masterpiece. So pretty much L.J. Reynolds replaced Ouija, and Albert Wilkins, he ended up quitting and got replaced by Lenny Mays. And the next album that they did, called A Dramatic Experience, and this is another big hit from them, Hey You, Get Off My Mountain. It went on number 5 on the R&B charts, and it became one of their signature songs. They even said that after that point, they could not do a show and not do Hey You, Get Off My Mountain. Yeah, I already talked about that. And then it was also after this that, they started to have some issues. One of them being that Tony Hester, who was pretty much the writer and arranger for the Dramatics, started to develop a heroin addiction. And he then pretty much said that he had demons, and even on on that Dramatic Experience, he actually had songs like The Devil Is Dope, and and he was kind of like writing, songs that were somewhat in relation to himself, that he had these demons that he had trouble overcoming. And then also, another thing they talked about is that Ouija, who was the one who left after doing In the Rain, after the first album, he developed another group and called it the Dramatics. So you had 2 groups of Dramatics all performing at the same time. So what they did at Stax, was that they decided to call the group Ron Banks in the Dramatics, since Ron Banks was the founder of the group. They decided to do that, so they would give the distinction. But then later on, they finally settled it in court, and Ron Banks, along with the other members of the group, actually owned the name. So they were able to use the name The Dramatics, and they pretty much settled the deal with Ouija, since he was a member of the Dramatics at the time. They pretty much settled out of court, but Ron Banks ended up owning, along with the other members, actually got full ownership of the name The Dramatics. And another song that I definitely love from them, and I loved how they did this. I mean, I have to say this song was actually one of the main examples of the dramatic, ability of the Dramatics. And that was Me and Mrs. Jones, which was originally done by Billy Paul, but the way they did it, it was 5-part harmony. 5-part harmony. Y'all know the 5 heartbeats. Y'all know what I mean by that. But yeah, it was amazing because Willie Ford, who has like this deep, like baritone bass, he leads the song, and it's just wow. Like it's like all 5 of them, come in and do their role, and they made it into like a 5-part harmony. Something that was not done, and I think it's the principle of dynamics. It's certain things you can do with a group that you just can't do solo. I mean, Billy Paul, definitely, definitely had had a monster on his hands when he did the song, but they brought something different, because they made it into, a 5-part harmony song, and it just gave it a totally different swag and a totally different sound, and it was great. And pretty much they called it like the Luther Vandross syndrome. Is that you know how Luther did, like he would sing a song by Dionne Warwick or whoever, and once Luther puts his spin on it, it was Luther's song. And the same thing was about Me and Mrs. Jones. Once they put their spin on it, it was the dramatic song. And that their version went number 4 on the R&B charts, and that was cool. And then they also had another song, I'm Going by the Stars in Your Eyes, which is another beautiful song. Lily Mays actually sung lead on that one. And that album with both of those songs, Me and Mrs. Jones and I'm Going by the Stars in Your Eyes, that album went number 9 on the R&B charts. And they were getting, live shows. They were selling out everywhere. And they were really doing their thing in the 70s. And they also had, in 1975, they actually did the song Be My Girl, another classic from them. And it was actually wrote by Michael Henderson. And Michael Henderson, y'all know, definitely was a singer, songwriter in his own right. And that song, Be My Girl, went number 3 on the R&B charts. And so within their career, they had a total of 9 albums and 12 singles that were in the top 20. But by the 80s, things began to fall apart. One, their label, ABC, because after Stax folded, they ended up signing with ABC Records. So by the time they got with ABC, that's when they did, the name of the album was Dramatic Jackpot, and that's the album that had Me and Mrs. Jones, as well as I'm Going by the Stars in Your Eyes. And that album went number 9. So they were on ABC Records, but then within the 80s, ABC merged into MCA. So what MCA did was that they just released 2 albums and then they dropped them from the label. Also within the 80s, Tony Hester, the man who originally gave them some of those great songs, he was actually murdered at the age of 34. And it was an actual, a real tragic loss, for the Dramatics, because he was kind of like that, that extra member of the group. They bonded with him. He was like family to them, and due to the fact that he died at such an early age, definitely rocked them really hard. And then also, there was also power struggles in the group in the 80s. Ron Banks and LJ definitely, butted heads, because they both were like the lead singers of the group, and they both just had disagreements of where the direction of the group was going. And next thing you know, and the thing is, Willie Ford even talked about it. He said that they at one point had this strong family unit, but then it began to demise. So what ended up happening was that LJ went solo, Ron went solo. Pretty much Larry left because he had a really bad drug problem and he was addicted to cocaine. And he says that to this day he thanked God that he got away, from the drugs before the crack epidemic, because he said that he probably wouldn't be sitting there talking to you if he would have stayed where he was. And he pretty much cleaned himself up. He went back to college and ended up becoming a high school teacher. And within the mid 80s, LJ never, even though LJ went solo, he never lost sight of getting the group back together, and they did get back together. And they even got back with Ouija. He even came back with them, and they were getting gigs and were selling out throughout the country. And but the big impact was when they worked with Snoop Dogg. And Snoop Dogg even talked about that Dre wanted to bring each member into the studio individually to record the track. They were like, no, we had to come together. And once they got in there together and Dre was producing them, Snoop said that, yeah, they proved that it's all or nothing. They're one voice. And he said the fact that he produced all of them, it was like magic was done in that. And, magic was done, within that session. And also Snoop talked about, like, what inspired him was he was, working on the lyrics, it's a crazy mixed up world, it's a doggy dog world. And he's like, man, this would sound good if the Dramatics sings this. And they, Snoop, I think, called LJ, and he was saying that he wanted the Dramatics to be on this song. And first he was like, LJ was like, man, forget this, man, what the hell, like, I ain't really with it. But then he called back and he's like, look, I'm about to do my solo album, my debut album, and I already got, over 1 million orders already for my album. And he was like, oh, okay, what the hell the address? So LJ said that he realized that this is something he can't turn down. And Doggy Dog World was definitely one of my favorite tracks, off of Snoop's debut album. And I'm a big fan of Snoop. And the reason why I'm a big fan of Snoop is that Snoop always pays homage to old school R&B, funk, and soul. If you listen to Snoop's music, you always find a sample or a piece of R&B, soul, funk, it's always embedded in his music. I mean, he's always paying homage, to classic R&B and soul. So the fact that he brought them on just made the song even better. I mean, I remember, because I think Snoop's debut album came out, I think when I was like 10 or 11 years old. And I remember the video, he pretty much paid homage to the 70s, and the Dramatics are back there doing like their, steps, it's a doggy dog world. I mean, and they are just doing their thing, and and the song went number one. The song went number one, and, it actually introduced them to a new generation. And also, following that, it actually gave them, it gave them new life. And also, sadly, we actually lost members of the group. Lenny Mays had died from cancer in '94. Ron Banks, the founder of the Dramatics, he died from a heart attack in 2010. Willie Ford and LJ, are still alive. Also, Larry Squirrel, he's still alive as well, but he's still, but he even said that he even did the choreography for Doggy Dog World in his living room, and then they went to LA and recorded the video. So I thought that was pretty cool. But still to this day, I mean, the Dramatics are definitely a group that is unforgettable, and I'm so glad that Unsung finally did an episode on them, because it actually broadened my horizons and gave me more knowledge about the group, because I grew up listening to their songs. I mean, as a lot of people have, and their music will never die. But that's what I have for you guys. If I miss anything, put it down in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. But subscribe to my channel. Click that bell so you can get notifications every time I drop a video. Like this video, comment on this video, and share this video. And I will be back with the next episode of Unsung. And next week they're doing Shanice. I can't wait to cover her, because I'm definitely a big fan of hers as well. So until then, everybody, take care.